Good evening. Welcome to the Muddy Creek Podcast. Tonight we have a very interesting young man, Preston Dennett. Preston, I had to use a cheat sheet because you are everywhere and you have done everything. Very impressive. You were a MUFON investigator, a UFO researcher, an author, a ghost hunter, paranormal researcher. You have wrote over 30 books that have been translated into several languages. You have multiple TV experiences. You've been on multiple radio shows. Your books you have been featured in magazines. You name it, you have done it. You have quite a bit of a resume there, and it's very interesting. And you actually were on a call list back in the day when you were in California, and people would see some strange things. The police department would direct them to you. Yeah. And we're so excited that you jumped in tonight and that you took time out of your day to spend some time with us. And we're very honored to have you.
Hey, I feel the same way. It's a pleasure and an honor. So thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So Don's really excited. You'll see me on mute a lot because I know you guys don't want to hear me doing that. So I have got a cold. So Don is going to lead off and I'll jump on. And if I have any questions, then I'm going to be right here, but I'm going to be on mute. So I apologize in advance. I don't mean any disrespect, but I don't want to disrespect you by having a snotty nose tonight, sir.
And we appreciate that, Ms. V. So I guess, Preston, we should start at the beginning. What got you interested into this field and any experiences you had? I guess a short bio of you.
Yeah, I got dragged into this field, honestly, involuntarily, kicking and screaming. I hated UFOs. I was not at all interested in them. Didn't believe in ghosts or Bigfoot, life after death, out-of-body experiences, psychic stuff. Just wasn't interested. I would call myself a materialist, really. But that, of course, all changed. The short version, really, is I heard this report on the news about a sighting over Alaska. I'll never forget it, November 17, 1986. And they featured this pilot who thought, this is what I'm thinking, thought he saw a UFO. And then I remember...
Was that the Japanese pilot?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Captain Kenji Torochi. It's a great case.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. They just laughed about it on the news and kind of tongue-in-cheek through the whole... But I remember they showed the pilot. And I thought, gosh, that poor guy, he's going to lose his job over this. I bet you, because who would report a UFO? I was right about that, it turns out.
He did? He lost his job? Oh, no kidding.
Temporarily. I mean, he did get put back, but no, they grounded him for a while. But I found out my older brother, Mark, had seen a UFO. I mean, I knew it because he had come running into the house. Gosh, it was almost 7 years earlier. I was about 13 years old, 14. And my older brother, Mark, I have 3 older brothers, came running into the house saying, I saw a UFO. And I remember we all just kind of turned and looked at him like, go away. UFOs aren't real. What are you talking about? And all I really remember him saying is it was very low, about telephone pole height.
Was it big? No. Big one or a small one?
Yeah, well, I went to him after I heard this report on the news. I'm like, Mark, did you hear about this pilot? He's like, no. I'm like, yeah, this guy thinks he saw a UFO. You think you saw one too? He's like, well, I did see one. I'm like, what do you think you saw? I still wasn't ready to believe. And I was really rude about it, actually. So I apologized to Mark. He's forgiven me. But yeah, I thought people who saw UFOs were on drugs or crazy or just naive or, I had all these reasons.
Right.
I was so wrong. And he described seeing this classic saucer. I mean, little lights around it, a dome on top. It was just 200 feet away, right above the telephone poles. He was driving with 2 friends, Phil and Greg, and they chased this thing down Reseda Boulevard. This is in LA, California, for about 15 minutes. And he said this thing would stop, wait for them. And as soon as they get real close to it, it would dart away ahead, kind of playing with them almost. He said other people were there chasing it too. His two friends saw it. It was totally silent. I'm like, look at Mark. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. He's like, no. If you don't believe me, call Phil, call Greg, his friends. And I did. I called them up because I knew him pretty well. And they, of course, confirmed his story. And it just kind of rolled out from there. I found out that his girlfriend, soon-to-be wife, had encounters as a little girl with little blue beings. That took her a little while to come out with.
Right.
And my other brother, his girlfriend, soon-to-be wife, had a very close-up sighting with a friend. I always thought people who saw UFOs were alone. Not true. Every single person I talked to had somebody with them, which was amazing to me.
Right.
She also saw gray ETs about 3 months later. And a couple of friends who had very close encounters. One had missing time. Didn't quite click to it as he's describing it because I wasn't really familiar with the concept of missing time. But
so how did you jump into the field? What did you start doing? Investigating encounters or?
Yeah, I started picking up books on it. I'm like, I'm going to disprove this. It's swamp gas. That's what we all know this is, right? Of course, there weren't the kind of books we see today. There was some, and I'm like, wow, this is a subject that's being taken seriously, and it's very well reported on. And there's a government cover-up. This is crazy. This looks like it's real. And stupid me, brought it up at the office where I worked, which had a high turnover. So there was a lot of people coming and going. And this lady I worked with for quite some time, it's like, oh yeah, me and my whole family saw UFOs. I'm like, oh my God, what are you talking about? She's like, yeah, you should talk to my daughter. She says, these little guys came into her bedroom. I'm like, what? Grays? And she's like, yeah, is that what you call them? I'm like, yeah, because I had just, picked up Bud Hopkins' book, Missing Time, which was in hardcover back then. It wasn't a bestseller yet. So, yeah, then I found out about MUFON. This is about 1988. So it's about just over a year. I'm like, MUFON, wow. And started going to their monthly meetings. I'm like, you can become a field investigator. I'm like, let's go. What do I have to do? I'm like, it's a take-home test.
Yes, you said that was pretty intense. I thought you could just sign up. They'll just throw you out there, but that's not the case. Can you tell us about some of the training you had? I found that to be intriguing.
Yeah. Now, if you want to become a field investigator, you have to go through classes and do. Back then, it was a little bit more easy, I guess, but not too easy. Because by this point, I'm already I've talked to quite a few people, family, friends, and coworkers, 30, 40 of them almost, who had encounters. So I always tell skeptics, if you don't believe in UFOs, you should ask people you love and trust. And I think you'll be surprised. I was scandalized. I was so mad that they had kept this secret from me. I'm like, how could you not tell me? Like, you didn't believe in this stuff. I'm like, oh, well, you're right.
Do you find that people are easier to talk about it if you bring up the subject first?
Yeah. Absolutely. They're very less likely to talk about it because nobody wants to be ridiculed. And back then, the ridicule was fierce. I mean, it was bad. So I'm like, okay, MUFON. This is cool. There's people who actually take this seriously. Mind you, there was about 10 people who met monthly in this little back room of a bank. Over the next 5 or 10 years, it grew over 100 people in a major little speaking engagement center.
What do you think the change was? You think people were more accepting of it?
I think so. There was just some really interesting events that started to unfold. And I'll get to that. Let me just explain MUFON because I wanted to become a field investigator, and they're like, okay, just take this take-home test. I'm like, great, take-home test. This is going to be a breeze. But this was before the internet, right? So, and I got the test, and it was over 100 questions, maybe 200. It was a lot. And I had every UFO book at this point. I subscribed to the MUFON Journal, and I actually said to them, you know what? You've been around since 1967. Send me every single back issue you got. So I was serious.
That's serious.
I joined Citizens Against UFO Secrecy, Operation Right to Know, QFOS, any organization. I joined it. So I'm looking at this test. And there was a UFO section. Who are Betty and Barney Hill? What year did they have their? I'm like, oh, sure, easy. I breezed right through the UFO section, but then it got to weather, meteorology. I'm like, well, I took that in college. This shouldn't be too bad. It was difficult because there's like 30 different types of clouds. You wouldn't think so, but there are. And they wanted to know all of, how much you knew about that. Stratocumulus and, oh my gosh, cirrus and lenticular clouds, which are very much saucer shaped.
Yeah.
I had to look that up. There was a whole section on photography. I knew nothing about photography. My sister was an amateur photographer, so that helped. But I had to go to the library and look this stuff up. Of course, astronomy was a big section. And I took astronomy in college. I was pretty into science. So I had a leg up there. But even then, I'm like, this is, you had to know all the constellations and the planets and comets and all this stuff. So it was difficult. But, I'm a good student. I'm a nerd, kind of. I love tests all through school. People are like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I just like it.
Well, it was almost like you were destined to do it. Now, if you say you see a UFO, I'm with you. If you say you like tests, I'm kind of looking at you kind of weird, Preston.
I admit it. I'm weird. Yeah, I got in trouble at school.
Roll with it.
But it ended up being a good thing because I did really well in the test. I missed 2 questions, and I'm so mad because one was I clicked the wrong. One was multiple choice, and I filled in the wrong bubble. And the other, I honestly did not know it. But yeah, I did really well. But yeah, I was, and that's when they started referring cases to me, and I started investigating seriously. And the subject, I got so lucky because I came into this field in 1986. 1988 is when Whitley Strieber's book Communion came out. And nobody who's had any level of fame had ever come out to say, I'm having contact. He was a very well-established writer. His movie Wolfen had been made into a feature film. He was pretty well known. At the same time, Billy Meyer, that case, was getting international headlines because Gary Kinder, a mainstream author, wrote a best-selling book on that case. And of course, Bud Hopkins' book, Missing Time, was picked up by a major publisher, and that became a bestseller. Communion broke publishing records. Nobody had seen a book do this well. It stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for, I think it was over a year. Still, I think the best-selling UFO book of all time. Nobody wanted it either. You could not sell it.
Was that Whitney or something? What was his name?
Yeah, Whitley Strieber.
Whitley Strieber. Okay.
Yep.
Preston, you have a very nice comment. I want to get in if you don't mind. Preston and Dolly helped me understand the mothership and the room I was in on there a lot better. Okay, I'm sorry. You helped them understand the mothership a lot better, and your channel is amazing. And I wanted to point that out to you. I do have a question by Lavani. It says, would Preston be able to say if a photo of something in the sky is a UFO? It's kind of...
Yeah, I do get people sending me photos quite a bit, and I will just preface that saying I'm not a photo analyst. I used to refer them to Bruce Maccabee, who is, but he's no longer with us.
Yeah.
It's very sad. We're losing a lot of really wonderful people.
Right.
But so yeah, I do see a lot, and certainly people are sending me weird cloud formations, and I've learned to recognize what a rocket looks like. and various things. So yeah, to some extent, these, it's such a shame that we now have, I mean, it's good news in some ways, but AI and Photoshop and, all the ways you can create just about anything.
Right.
And it looks so real that photographic evidence these days is not as valuable as it was before the internet, before, we have all these
Right.
AI.
There's a program out there that'll tell you if it's AI, isn't there?
There's some, but it's not always reliable.
Okay.
And in fact, even back in the day, photographs were considered great evidence. But if you don't have a person who's willing to stand behind it and provide an eyewitness testimony, and basically say, I did take this picture, and here's where I took it, and when, and so forth, it's not as useful as you'd think. And it was still easy to fake. You can throw a tuna can into the sky, and it can be considered genuine. There were some really good photographs that ended up not being genuine. There are some that have stood the test of time, certainly.
The capsule things. We had a gentleman right down the road from us that was in a hunting stand one time, and he said this like cigar or capsule like thing just come down, and it was making no noise, and it just hovered in the field, and it was following this deer around. Have you ever gotten anything like that? I mean, credible man. I mean, he's been in the area his whole life. Farmer, hunter, lives off the land. Good man, outstanding, standing in the community. And I'm kind of curious about how much that something similar to that gets reported. I'm pretty sure he would like to hear. There are other people out there that's seen that.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to say it's super common, but there's, if you dive into the UFO literature, there is a whole category of cases where UFOs come down and will take soil samples or plant samples, picking flowers or grass or leaves, and of course animals. And you will see a lot of these encounters happening at farms. People complaining about their rabbits being taken. There was one guy in France actually who caught these little short humanoids taking his rabbits. He lifted up his rifle and suddenly became so heavy he had to drop it. They did something, and then he was paralyzed, and off they went with his rabbits. Cases like that of chickens, deer, definitely, fish, I've heard a few, crocodiles. I mean, there's a whole list of animals that they have scooped up. They're very interested in all things Earth. They're collecting genetics of pretty much all forms of life on our planet, including us, which in some ways is comforting because we won't go extinct. Humanity, I mean, because they've got our genetics. There's no doubt about that. That's very well established. But yeah, animals of all kinds have been taken.
Do you find more accounts anywhere in the country of the little creatures? Are there more out west than there are on the East Coast, or is it pretty much the same?
Yeah, I've wondered about that. And I'm still diving into this because I recently put out a challenge, to people who are watching my channel or, interested in my research, name any town, name a city, any place on Earth, and I will see if I can find a UFO encounter there. This is kind of to figure out, are UFOs ubiquitous? Are they being seen everywhere? And of course, the answer is yes, they are. There are hot spots. There's no doubt about that there are some areas that seem to be more prone to UFO activity. And I'd say there's probably one in every general area, every state, as an example.
Alaska's got some weird junk going on there, buddy.
Yeah.
Brother, that's no wonder everybody.
Alabama, Fife,
33rd
Alabama.
parallel. 33rd parallel.
Yeah. Well, I've heard that. I don't know, because you name a parallel, I can line up cases right along that. But the Santa Monica Mountains off of the Southern California coast, the Santa Catalina Channel, a huge number of reports there. Sedona, Arizona.
Okay, I was going to ask, do you find more near water?
Yes. But I think that's a little bit deceiving. You know, you can kind of make statistics to say whatever you want, because the fact is most people live next to water. Most of the human population is clustered against coastlines, around lakes, along rivers. USOs, as we call them, unidentified submersible objects, didn't get a whole lot of attention for a long time until recently, last 5 or 10 years or so. So that's become a more popular subject. And yeah, there is a link for sure, because these objects are coming in and out of the water, sometimes in large numbers. I mean, I wrote an entire book about just the activity off the Southern California coast. But I've got cases of them coming out of like Lake Hamilton in Hot Springs, Arkansas, an amazing missing time case there. Some off the coast of Florida, up the East Coast. I mean, you name it. There's quite a bit of activity over water. There's a lot of speculation about why. I don't think they use water as a fuel source, but there are cases where they've sucked pools dry, took the water right out of it.
Maybe they need water where they come from. I don't know. I do have a question for you, Preston. It says, Preston, can you please tell me if you know what the George Bush Ranch in Waco, Texas has to do with abduction cases in the 80s?
Oh, wow. No, I've never heard that connection before. The only connection I've heard with George Bush's ranch is the Stevensville wave in Texas, which was, oh my gosh, that's so long ago. I forget the date, 2006. I forget what date it was. Don't quote me on that. But from what I understand, there was a wave over Stevensville, a fairly smallish town, and it was caught on radar, weather radar, very well established, going straight towards George Bush's ranch. I think there's so much going on behind the scenes that we're not aware of. Certainly not the general public, but even, the UFO community, UFO researchers. This cover up is for real.
Most of the craft we see are man-made
these days. Yeah. I think so.
We talked about this before the show, but Blue-Eyed Northern wants to say, do you have any thoughts between UFO and cryptids?
I do. Yeah. Cryptids was a subject I kind of shied away from, because I'm like, what if Bigfoot is real? I just bet it's real. I don't really want to go into that, because that's going to be a can of worms. That's going to take me off on another direction. But I did get a case, and as a researcher, you have to pay attention to what the witnesses are saying. You can't just throw away evidence because it doesn't fit your worldview, right?
That's
and
right.
This guy had a UFO land in his backyard. This is right off the LA National Forest, which is huge. You would think so. It's right outside of LA, but it's giant. It's a huge wilderness area. And he had a Bigfoot sighting the next day in the same exact spot. It's like, I'm telling you, these things are connected somehow. And then I got another case where these two phenomena, Bigfoot and UFOs, coincided. I started looking into it. There's a smattering of cases, probably 50 or 100 in the literature, which is really not a whole lot when you consider there's probably a database of well over 1 million recorded encounters. But these are undeniably connected in some cases. There was another case in that exact area where a guy saw a landed UFO and a Bigfoot walking around it with the little grays. I'm like, what is going on here? Is Bigfoot an ET?
I always thought those T-shirts were just a cool. Okay.
Here's my new assessment, actually, because people are like, Bigfoot's an alien. I'm like, I ended up writing a book on Bigfoot, talking to a bunch of people, researching. Had my own Bigfoot encounter, actually, honest to God, because I'm the kind of researcher. I want to go out and see this myself.
Wait. You can't just put that out there and not go into it, Preston. Come on now.
All right. But well, let me just say my assessment of what's going on here is that Bigfoot is not an ET as we would think of it, because they've been around on this planet forever. Accounts go so far back. It's in every darn place on this planet. I think they're sentient. I really do. I think they're intelligent. I think they've got amazing psychic abilities, because there's all these paranormal stuff that comes along with some of these Bigfoot cases. And I think what's happening, this sounds so crazy when I say this, but this is where the evidence led me. I think some Bigfoot are essentially UFO contactees, very much like, a person would be.
Right. Now, I've always been under the impression that when a Bigfoot is seen, they're either being taken or returned.
Yeah.
Like they take humans and animals and stuff.
Yeah.
That's what but I've never really got into it and really looked at all the encounters. That's just was my thought. But yeah.
I think so.
Something. Yeah. Do you really think they're sentient beings?
I do. I'm not going to say all of them, because there's quite a variety there. People think they kind of lump all of ETs into one basket. There's grays and mantids and human looking and little tall whites. There's a big variation among the grays alone, with some being probably little AI biological androids, perhaps. Others being quite tall. Others, many different types is my point. And same with Bigfoot.
Right.
Some are like wild men, very much like, could very well be Neanderthal. Again, sounds crazy, but if you look into, how much of our world has been explored, it's not as much as you would think. Yes, people have walked across wilderness areas, but if these guys are psychic, these Bigfoot, and super, sensitive in terms of seeing in the dark and smelling you a mile away, and can turn invisible, apparently, some of them.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's their hair that refracts light, because I've seen it happen. I'm a researcher, and I have them close by me. I've had a few sightings around here, but I saw one blur out, and he ran through the woods. All the branches were moving, and I could tell something was there. But I moved up to get a better look behind him, and all I could see were the soles of his feet popping up, which there's no hair on the bottom of their feet, And so I always thought it was their hair. Well, that's the conclusion I came to.
There's something going on, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
If you look into the psychic abilities of advanced yogis and enlightened masters, they can levitate, they can turn invisible, teleport, do all kinds of stuff. So this is something I think that an ascension entity has the ability to develop. Just, my theory, but yeah.
Right.
I talked to this lady up in Acton who was having Bigfoot encounters. And she's like, I'm telling you, you can talk to my son. He's 6 or 7, but I have a roommate. He saw it. It looked in all 3 of their windows.
Yeah.
He woke up the next morning, Mommy, Monkey Man was in the tree. And she's like, oh my God, I saw him in the room. And I went over there. I saw the tree. It broke a branch about yay big. There were footprints. And it was hard-packed sandy soil, so you couldn't really tell. But it put a boulder on top of her roof. It took 2 or 3 guys actually to put this boulder off of her roof. How did that get up there? She says it was the Bigfoot. Okay. She's like, I know where it lives. I know, I'm pretty sure, because she also said she felt a telepathic connection, which is what this other witness told me, a radiologist in Canyon Country. I'm like, oh gosh, okay. This turns up in a number of cases. She's like, I'm telling you, it just lives down this canyon. She lives in Acton, off the 14 freeway, which is off the 5 freeway. This is a hugely busy freeway. So it took me an hour or 2 to get up there. I still know her. We're pretty good friends. She's in Australia now. But I went off the 5 freeway on the 14 into this little town of Acton, which is right on the edge, the north edge of the national forest, and kind of bordering the desert there. And she's like, I'll show you where I think it is. And we brought cameras. We brought sound equipment. And we drove up there. It's about 4 miles from our house, down this remote canyon and down this dirt road, which starts to get a little treacherous. And we went there at dusk because, it's kind of nocturnal. This thing would come around at night. And we had no sooner parked, and the stars are just beginning to come out. And she opens the door, goes to the back seat, and she's pulling out the sound equipment right? And I walk, I drove up there in my car. I'm walking around in the front of the car and I'm surveying the lay of the land. I'm like, look at that. Because she points to this ridge. And I'm like, this ridge is like that steep, 45. Not kidding. These were steep mountains with thick, thick brush. I'm like, well, there's just no way anyone can hike that easily. And it was a gorge that went down that was already dark. You couldn't really see in it. Pretty tall mountains around here. And I'm just looking around and all of a sudden I hear this roar. And I'm like, what the heck? And I look up thinking, is that a plane kind of dive bombing us? Because that was my first thought, right? But very clearly it was a roar from an animal that went on for a good 20 seconds, maybe 30, which is a long time. And it was rumbling in my chest. Now, I grew up next to cougars in Topanga Canyon. Not only wild ones, the neighbor had captive cougars. So I knew it wasn't that. We had coyotes, I'm all about bears. I know bears very well. I was at the zoo and a lion roared right next to me. Kind of reminded me of that, honestly. But this was different. And I don't know how to describe it other than how other people have described it to me. But it's multi-tonal. It's got high-pitched aspects to it, but really low and rumbling. I'd bet you, if you were to take a audio device of some kind, it would be subsonics, if you know what I mean, beyond the level that we can even hear. Right. Then it roared again, and because I'm looking all around, I'm like, and then when it roared again, because I'm like walking back and forth, I'm like, where is this thing? Because it's so loud, it's got to be pretty close. And it roared again, and I'm like, oh, it's coming from that gorge. And I start running towards it. Now she loses her mind, absolutely. And she's like, what are you doing? She starts screaming. She's in the car. She's like, get back here now, we're leaving. She was afraid it was going to kidnap her. And I'm like, no, they don't kidnap people. What are you talking about? I didn't know. They do. There are cases.
That's a common reaction, though. I have talked to several people that ran home and locked themselves in a room, thinking it was going to come out of the woods into a neighborhood and go right into their house.
Yep. There are cases of it appearing in people's bedrooms, too, through the walls. That's pretty rare, but I've heard that. So, yeah, she's lost her mind with this. And I really, I don't know. I'm stupid, I guess, but I had no fear of that. When I see a UFO, I run towards it. People are running away. I'm like, what are you doing? This is interesting.
You and LaVon in chat. You and LaVon would get along great.
But yeah, she I out of respect for her, I turned around and off we went. She's like, I told you. She says it roared 3 times. I have trained myself as an observer. Pretty sure it was 2, but it was very exciting. So maybe she's right. I don't know. But off we went. And I didn't see it. I have to say, I did not see it. But
was it difficult to tell where the sound was coming from?
The first roar, it was. Because, I'm like, and it's going on and going on. Sound is tricky anyway.
Right.
But when it roared the second time, I was pretty, kind of able to triangulate it, I guess would be a way of putting it. Like that, I can tell it's coming from there. Because you turn your head and you can tell where sound is coming from. It was so cool. I wanted to go back. She ended up moving away.
We had a question. Since you're in Georgia, have you heard of the Meadow in Alabama? Blue want to know if you have been to the Meadow.
Can't say I've heard of that. No, there is a Bigfoot museum not far from me.
If you ghost hunt and you need to get up with us after the show.
Oh, really?
Definitely.
I've done some ghost hunting. I've seen a few ghosts too.
Out of respect for some people's work, I won't say it on the show, but yes, that's a very interesting area. I think you would be highly impressed with that. So you've seen UFOs and Bigfoots. I think you're just destined to see weird stuff. I mean, that's pretty impressive. You know,
I don't know because I didn't see anything growing up.
that you know about, but you said things make sense kind of looking back.
Yeah.
That'd
Well,
be the
it's
way it would.
interesting. Yeah. Because, finding out UFOs were real, and then I'm like, it's in my family. Because it turned out my brother and sister-in-law, their son saw a UFO and had a humanoid come into his bedroom. Now that's a red flag. First he saw the UFO, and then, like, oh gosh, she saw grays. He saw grays. My other sister, her son had a UFO come and basically show off. Put on a little display for him, and off it went. And found out my little sister had a missing time encounter. She's like, I forgot to tell you. I'm like, what?
Well, she
I'm interested in this. Oh, man. And so, yeah, it kind of dawned on me at one point that it is in my family, and we know this tracks families. And it wasn't long before I saw a UFO. I mean, I saw some unexplained lights, but
Orbs.
yeah, orbs and stuff like that. But I'm like, well, that's just a light.
Yeah.
And weirdly, finding out UFOs were real had me reevaluate everything and I became almost more skeptical. So I'm like, everyone's lying to me. Government's lying to me. I can't trust anybody. I've got to change my whole worldview. I've got no belief system. It's completely crushed. So I was very skeptical of everything and everybody. So people would tell me this stuff. I'm like, okay, let's dig deep. Do you have character reference? I go through this whole vetting process.
Wow.
And skeptical of my own darn eyes. But then I did see one that was absolutely undeniable. This was a huge wave of sightings going on in my hometown, Topanga, where I just moved out of. On June 14th, 1992, a bunch of people called the police. A bunch of people called the local newspaper, and they were reporting UFOs, cars being chased on the road, craft landing, people seeing ETs going on board. I mean, the whole deal. And so that's when I contacted the police, and they were referring me cases. And it was pretty much narrowed this down to about July 20th, 1992, thereabouts. And I'm driving home after visiting my brother and sister-in-law in Woodland Hills, and I'm going to Canoga Park, which borders Topanga, all of this. And it's just a 5-mile drive home. It's almost midnight. And I just left their house, and I'm coming around this real sharp corner when I saw what I thought first was a bird swooping down from way up high to the right. And I look up at that, and this corner is so steep, you can't really drive any faster than 5 miles an hour. And I look up, and this darn thing is not a bird. I'm thinking, well, it's a firecracker because it's July, right? And it comes swooping down in a parabola, kind of like that, towards my car. I'm like, whoa. So I stopped the car, and it's right in front of my windshield. As far away as I am from the computer, real close. And it's about the size of a golf ball, a little bigger. It's white, kind of white-yellow, but mostly white, hard edges. It's kind of wavering there. It's clearly intelligently controlled, because now I'm thinking, reflection? No. You go through this whole process. You don't jump to UFO, ever. I've never done. Every time I'm like, what am I seeing? And this darn thing moves to the left, all the way to the right, all the way back to the left, back right in front of me. Like, oh my God, I'm gripping my steering wheel like, what the heck is going on? And it darts forward and goes straight up, and it's gone. And that's all I remember. And in fact, I forgot the whole darn thing. Didn't remember any of it. Didn't remember the sighting at all until a few months later, or it just popped in my head. I'm like, oh my God. So I don't remember driving home. I don't remember telling anybody. I had missing time. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind.
Wow.
I got a quick question here for you. If where they take us has no gravity, do you think it's underwater or outer space or something else?
Well, I mean, that's kind of speculative, so I couldn't really say for sure, other than, because I hate to speculate on this, but people are taken into craft, certainly, and they sometimes describe floating around. I think the ETs are able to basically levitate you, or definitely a slightly lighter gravity. Underwater, gravity is still the same, so, but they do take people into outer space. Absolutely. People have looked out the window and there's nothing but a star field. They will actually take you to the window and like, look, there's the moon. Look at the earth. That's the earth below. People are like, oh my God. But generally, it's gravity normal or very close to it inside the craft.
Right. I remember an encounter. It happened out west. A gentleman was in a pickup truck and he saw an orange orb about the same size I saw, about the size of a cantaloupe. And he was following it. And then next thing he knows, he woke up laying down in a field with his truck running on the side of the road. And he just got up and left, and time had passed. And then later on, his memories came back of being in a craft. So I guess my question is, do you think those orbs are a type of transport device, or do you think that is the ship, those orbs?
I think they're basically what we would call a probe, because it's a precursor to usually a much larger craft. I will say there are a few instances of people seeing what would be an orb and it elongates and widens and it's a being, or even in a couple of cases a craft. But that's only a few cases that I know of. I've never gotten one.
Right.
But certainly, yeah, these orbs seem to show up right prior to a much larger encounter.
Now, the first one I saw up close, I was riding a bicycle and I was in a big city. I was in Brockton, Massachusetts. It's a good sized city. And I saw it to my right and I could tell we were on an intersect course. So I bicycled ahead and I got behind a tree. And the leaves in the tree were obscuring it, but I could see it coming right over the tree. It was about 50, 60 feet off the ground. And when it came over the tree, I was right there. And it realized I was right there. And I realized what I was seeing now, because I thought it could have been a drone, maybe a remote control helicopter or something. Yeah. But right when I looked at it, it vibrated. It dropped particles from like its equator. And then it just took off. It was gone. And I said, what the heck was that? That's the one I reported with MUFON. But do you think the colors of the orbs have anything to do with what they are?
I've looked a little bit into that, and I've not been able to correlate it to any. And people have tried to do that with ships, like, because there's different people who report saucers and egg-shaped and V-shaped and spheres and cigars, and people have tried to correlate that to a type of ET without success, in my opinion.
Okay.
Certainly I've looked to it in my own files. No, I can't say that the color of the orb or even the type of craft is any type of ET. Mostly what I hear is basic saucer shaped, or even like more manta ray shaped, or boomerang, I guess would be a way of putting it. Almost a full disc, but more sort of boomerang shaped is actually fairly common. There's again, perspective plays a big deal here. And if you're frightened and it's at night, and people have a real hard time estimating the size, the distance, the shape of these things. And if you're taken inside, boy, people are at a loss for words then. Because I'm like, well, describe it. I'm like, I don't even know how to describe this to you. So that's why drawing, when someone's an artist, I'm like, oh, yay. Now they can, picture is worth more than 1,000 words when it comes to this subject.
Right.
I actually ended up using my sister-in-law, Kisara, as a police sketch artist. She's very talented. She's illustrated a lot of my books. She'd come along with me and draw people's ETs.
Wow.
It was so amazing, because I'd be like, okay, tell me your story. She's standing there, sitting there, and she'd ask for details about the ET. The poor witnesses would break out into tears when they saw her drawing. They're like, oh my God. Because it was shock for them to see it.
Absolutely. I wouldn't. Oh, wow. You're lucky to have that kind of person to have access to something like that. And I imagine it helps people when they see it drawn out too, especially when you can say this has been brought up before and it corresponds with other people's. Oh, I'm just going to give a shout out to Michael. He said your name was brought up on the Joe Rogan podcast today, and also on Concrete. That's also a good podcast. So I just wanted to let you know we are out there talking about you, buddies. Joe Rogan. You know I got to put Joe Rogan out there. AAO said the rooms on board of their ships had instant triangulation.
Triage.
No.
Oh, okay, whatever. There goes my GED education. Go ahead. So if you guys can imagine going to the ER and when you leave something, everything is fixed. So basically they're saying a healing power. Have you had that before?
This is absolutely a huge part of the ET agenda, ET contact. I'm telling you that this deserves far more attention, because I started getting cases of this right off the bat, and I'm looking at the media and I'm like, people are being experimented on by these emotionless bug-like grays. Well, hold on a second, this is not the kinds of cases I'm getting, and I started to realize that the media is biased, and that there is not only a cover-up but disinformation and a fear-based narrative being put forth that's not warranted and is not accurate. Not to say that this isn't scary for people, because it is. And I'll underline that.
They do that to many different topics.
Many.
Fear. Yeah.
But yeah, that was my first book, UFO Healings, 100 cases. And I put out another one not too long ago, The Healing Power of UFOs, with over 300 cases. And I've got the research down. You cannot deny it. If you take a look at, if you go on Amazon and just read the forward, because you can, every single researcher out there who has done any level of research into onboard experiences has these cases. And that includes David Jacobs, who doesn't really like ETs, but he's got a bunch of healing cases. But Bud Hopkins, John Mack, Edith Fiore, Barbara Lamb, Yvonne Smith, Philip Mantle, Timothy Good, Brad Steiger, Tim Beckley. I mean, I can go on. This is Ray Hernandez. It's a big part of ET. This is one of the reasons people are taken on board and physically examined.
Yeah, I heard a story of a guy that had a brace or something inside of him. And when he woke up, the brace was on the floor and it had been removed and he was healed. He had something inside of him. Now I have a implant also, and I had a orb sighting here at my house where I saw a little tiny light directly above me, just a little tiny blinking light, and it looked like it was doing a figure 8 right above me, but it looked like it was way up there. So I took my flashlight out and I had it on strobe, and I put the strobe right on it, and it stopped. And so I'm looking up in the sky, waiting for it to reappear, and right in the northeast sky, a big triangle appeared. 3 points of light that got brighter and brighter, and then a point in the middle of the triangle, which got brighter and brighter, ended up being the brightest spot in the sky. And then it just went poof, like it blew and dropped right through the triangle and just disappeared as it went down. And I remember calling a friend of mine right away, and I knew he worked nights, and I just wanted someone on the phone because I remember saying to him, I just want someone to talk to in case I get abducted.
Yeah.
But I was always hoping that, hey, maybe they'll fix me, because I've got bad back issues.
Yeah. Well, I can say that, I've got a whole list of conditions people have been healed of, and bad back is one of them, but liver disease, kidney disease, heart disease, lung problems, minor infections, broken bones, burns, tumors, cysts, cancer, diphtheria, diabetes, hepatitis. It's a long list. But, some people are taken on board and they're healed of one thing, and the ETs are like, well, we can't heal you with this. You chose this karmically. You chose this to learn a certain lesson. And that's come up in a number of cases.
Huh.
So that was kind of interesting.
Like, what would that be? What kind of sickness or injury would that be?
Well, as an example, one lady I talked to who had a car accident, they told her that she had actually died in this accident. She wasn't supposed to. And they had healed her of most of her injuries, but they said, we can't heal you of all of them because this is, you chose this. This is a karmic lesson for you. So in that case, it was injuries. But I know of cases of people who have chronic problems and they're not being
Like
healed.
lifestyles, like a lifestyle.
So yeah, there's something going on. I mean, it's really interesting because I know a case of a lady who basically prayed. She had been diagnosed with breast cancer. She had no history of encounters, but little grays came down and healed her. Really not sure why. I've found a couple of patterns. One is that if you have a history of contact, you're much more likely to be healed. If it's in your family or if you've had repeated encounters, over 50% of the cases. But it's evenly divided between men and women. It can happen to people who are very young or very old. It's all over the world. I did find another interesting pattern that's not super prominent, but it keeps coming up because I just interviewed this guy who is a social or working against racism. He had been healed of a blood clot in his leg. Then this lady from Norway calls me and she says, I heard you're doing research into healing cases. I had grays come in and heal me of my back. I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. What happened? She described this instrument I've heard other people describe. She said the grays came in. They didn't say a word. They scared me to death. They flipped me around like a rag doll. They were in and out. But they healed me of my back. And I'm like, what happened? She said, well, I had an accident some years ago. Had to quit work because of it. And now I'm able to do what I really wanted to do. I'm like, what do you do? Because she had no history of encounters. I'm like, why was this lady healed? She's not fitting the pattern. And she's like, well, please don't use my name. I'm very well known in my community for animal and human rights. And that rang a bell because I started thinking, well, Michael Carter, he was healed of a blood clot. He fights against racism. Then there's John Hunter Gray. He's won awards for his work on Native American rights. He was healed as well. And I'm like, well, gosh, there's a nurse who was healed. There's a doctor who was healed. There's an artist. There's teachers. It's people who are doing good work for humanity. An inventor in England. So I started going through all my files. I'm like, wow, a lot of artists and musicians and environmentalists and animal rights activists and people who are, in some capacity doing good work for humanity. So.
Now, the ones that didn't get healed, where they had no plans for the future or they didn't?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say because, if they're not reporting a healing to me, I'm really not analyzing their case. But yeah, I mean, people are taken on board and not healed that they're aware of, but almost always, this is the most common thing. When you're taken on board, you're more likely than not to be physically examined, to get a checkup of some kind. They'll give you dietary advice. One guy, he was pulled on board and they gave him this little box filled with black goo. I said, this is our gift to you. And he's like, what kind of the gift is this? And I said, we pulled this out of your lungs. You need to stop smoking. Well, Jim Sparks, another well-known contactee, reported this same thing. But this is another case, same exact thing. Ichis took him later on board and said, you need to stop smoking marijuana. This is not the life that we had planned for you. I thought, what? Wait, you're planning someone's life? They told one lady, she had prayed because she had kidney failure, real bad. Went to the doctor. He's like, oh my God, why haven't you come to the doctor? She's like, well, I couldn't go to the bathroom for 2 or 3 days. He's like, you're in kidney failure. You need to dialysis. You need to go to the ER right now. She went home to tell her family and her boss that she wasn't coming to work. She said, please pray for me. I'm going to the ER right now, and fainted onto her bed and woke up. And there was these little, not grays, short little humanoids working on her. She's going in and out of consciousness, wakes up in the morning and she's fine. She goes to the bathroom, goes to the doctor, and he's like, well, I don't even know what to tell you. Maybe I didn't misdiagnose you. I don't think I did, but what happened? She's like, well, angels came. So she started telling everyone, I think I got visited by angels. And she's knowing full well these were not angels. And it was a month or two later, she got pulled on board. She described the round room being laid out, all the things, the details we hear. And there were these little guys again. And she describes this instrument I've heard before, which they lay on your abdomen and it projects the inside of your body in full living color. They said, here's your kidneys. They look fine, don't they? They were all pink and healthy. She's like, yeah. And then said, see this? This is your liver. Do you see those black spots? And she did. They said, your liver is very unhealthy. You need to stop drinking so much Diet Coke. It is damaging your liver. So they give dietary advice. They told one lady, you're eating too much fat. You're getting fat. Stop eating so much fatty foods.
So two things. Two people mentioned the black triangle that we talked about earlier with the lights. So I just thought I would acknowledge that you said that could be reverse engineering from alien technology. Second thing is the implants just come up. Do you find that when people have been healed, they have implants, or can we go into the implants after Don asks his question?
Okay. Quick question. Do you think our lives are predestined, or these creatures can see into the future?
No, I don't think our lives are predestined, but I do think we come down here with a plan, a blueprint, so to speak, with certain goals in mind, and that there's an element of predestiny. But no, we have free will. I think there's no doubt about that. I think if you dive into philosophy, I love philosophy in college. I mean, it's the age-old question, isn't it? But we don't know. We're still figuring out. But I think that they certainly do have knowledge of our future.
Right. So they can see the future.
To some extent. Yeah, they warn people
extent,
all the time about, this could happen, and it does. And I've had
they may be able to see different futures also if they know you're sick. Obviously that future for you it's bleak,
Yeah,
but they want to change it,
I love the comments from AAO. I'm reading them.
I would love.
Yes, I've heard that. Very little furniture on them board. Yep, that's very much true.
Like a catacomb.
Yeah.
There was some up here saying something about fluids, in my opinion. And I was trying to put them up here for, people that go back and watch, maybe.
Yeah, this is a problem when someone's a contactee, it's very difficult to process, especially in the beginning. And this is one of the things I always ask people, do you have insomnia? Do you sleep with night lights on? Do you have fear of intruders? Do you have a feeling of being watched? And these are all sort of signs of being a contactee. It's very difficult for people to deal with.
Do you know the story of the two sisters that moved to Massachusetts? They were abducted there. Yeah, they were abducted. I think so. Yeah,
the twins.
The twins, right? I met one. She worked at a bar, and I saw her. She was on a show, and she mentioned where she worked, and there was only one or two places it could have been. So I went down, and she was there, and I talked to her a little bit about it. But she was telling me, and I think they talked about it on the show, where another guy was with them on the ship, and he came into the bar just by chance, and her and her sister were going, "Hey, that's him." They went over and talked to him. Yeah, and then he remembered him from the ship. But their dad, I think they were from like Ohio or something, and their dad was a preacher, and he was told he had to move to Massachusetts, and they were followed. They were abducted in Ohio, and when they moved, they were abducted in Mass.
Yeah, there are many cases of people who were brought together as children who don't know each other. There's a book by Beth Collings and Anna Jamerson. I believe those are pseudonyms, but that was the names they put on the book. They were brought together from different states on a craft as child, grew up as adults, and crossed paths and recognized each other. and started talking about it, like, yeah, you are the girl I saw on board a craft. And some people are basically brought together and, to meet, I call it the ET dating service because I've got a number of cases where people like, their spouse turns out to be a contactee, which what are the chances of that?
That's
crazy.
Interesting.
So yeah, there's an element of that too, of guidance, I guess is how I would put it.
Right. I'm just going to go back a few minutes. About the orbs. I've seen other orbs, but I hadn't had an interaction with them or they weren't close to me. But everyone I've seen seems to be heading east or northeast. Have you ever noticed? Do you ever notice that in sightings or?
No, I'd have to look back in my files, but just off the bat, I'm going to say that they go in pretty much all directions, because they might come through the wall or through the window and they go straight up, or all different directions. Rarely down, I will say. People don't generally describe them going into the earth or anything like that. As far as pyromedics question, do contactees wake up around 0300? I'm not going to say necessarily that time, but sometimes 3:30 or 4 a.m. or 2:30. I think what's going on there is someone will have an encounter at that time, and it's sort of a trigger, a cue, because they will come at the same time, like once every week or once every couple of months, or for some people it can be a nightly affair for a little while. Generally not for too long, but that does happen, and this will cause you to wake up at the same time, or they will wake you up, call your name, like, we're here, don't be afraid, we're not here to hurt you, you're gonna be okay, come with us.
Yeah. 3 a.m. just seems to be an hour a lot of people wake up. There's just something about that hour. I don't know if it's something to do
the witching hour.
Well, they call it the witching hour, but is it, or is it something? Did the witching hour come out of the earth as in an energy or a certain spot? I don't know, but it just seems to be something with the 3 a.m. that, like a magnetic, something just wakes you up, and you look at the clock, it's 3 o'clock, 3:05 or 3:02, and
yeah, I've had a number of contactees tell me this, and I can only kind of scratch my head. I don't know. Research is so important in this field. It's still a relatively new field of study. People have been studying everything on Earth since for ages, but the modern age of UFOs began in 1947, and that's really when people started to study it. It was only a handful of people with any credentials whatsoever, like J. Allen Hynek and Leo Sprinkle and James McDonald, and just a handful of scientists were studying this. Now, of course, we've got an army of researchers out there, but even now, it's still a niche subject. UFO books don't sell anything like romance novels or cookbooks or self-help books or science fiction even. So it's still a real niche subject. It's changed in the last few years. It's going mainstream. But yeah, we're just crying for better research in this subject.
You said something in a interview that got my attention. You said that most people have negative memories or flashbacks of being in the ship, for lack of better words, until you explain to them, or you have to pull out the positive in them. Do you remember saying that?
Yeah. Well, this is a sort of a trick of the human mind, because when someone has an encounter and it's scary, and it often is, they can suppress it. We know this. This is a trick of human psychology. If anyone goes through trauma, whether it's child abuse or a war situation or a crime, they will often absolutely forget it or suppress it and not think about it. And this is exactly what's happening in a number of UFO cases. I always thought, the ETs are the ones who are suppressing our memory. They're facilitating it, but it's a two-way street. And what happens is people will go on board and they're being physically examined. And this is so scary for some people. And this is what causes a lot of people to label the experiences as negative because they don't like it. And that's 100% understandable. if this surprises you in the middle of the night and you're like, who are these guys? Look at the way they look. Oh my God. And next thing you know, you're on a craft. I can see how this would be absolutely traumatic. And it often is. And people will come back with just that memory or just flashbacks and are missing time, hours of it.
Right. Usually something triggers that memory for them.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. You'll see the cover of Whitley Strieber's book. I've had a lot of people tell me that. Or a bald mannequin, or a little person, or a light in the sky, or the word UFO, or just about anything. It can come spontaneously.
How many different creatures have you taken from encounters or seen? Or
a bunch. But let me just backtrack to this one question, because it's very scary. But what happens is people will perhaps go under hypnosis and they'll remember the physical exam and they don't want to do it anymore. But if they do, they get to the good stuff. And this is why I'm saying, they're not really here to hurt us, because there's a very set pattern of events that takes place. You're pulled on board, you're physically examined, sometimes healed, 20 to 50% of the time. They'll take you down to the engine room and show you how the craft is powered. Explain it in detail. There are people out there, there's a bunch of them who are filing patents for energy-free motors and perpetual motion machines based on what they learned, magnetic motors and so forth. But they'll take you to an observation room or deck and show you a star field. They'll show you the moon, Saturn. I've got cases of this. Earth down below, even another planet. They will sit down with you and give you personal messages about your life path, or about the world in general. Almost always against nuclear proliferation, war and aggression, greed and corruption, pollution, and the destruction of the environment. They're very concerned about that. And also they will reiterate that we are them, they are us, we share a common heritage. They let people know that we are immortal beings, that we do not die. There's a very strong spiritual aspect to all this that doesn't get the attention it deserves, because they basically ignite people's psychic abilities to an unbelievable degree. Almost every contactee has mediumistic abilities, or astral projection, or clairvoyance, or starts seeing shadow people, or starts having dreams that come true, or remote viewing, astral projection, healing, all of this stuff. This is what the ETs are doing. So that is, undeniably beneficial for us.
Right. Geez, you wonder why they don't abduct the people that are causing the destruction of the environment, or controlling the nukes.
Do.
Oh, they do. Okay.
Oh yeah.
They have a good talking to with them.
Every level of society, and I've talked with people who are, you name it, every profession you can think of, just about. But from the research I've looked into, they've taken, heads of state on board, people highly placed in government, in the military, but they're not necessarily having our best interests in mind. Some of these folks behind the cover up.
Right.
So they're not really concerned about the earth. They want money. They want power. They want control. It's unfortunate. But many different types of ETs. I get mostly grays, over 50%. But like I said earlier, a very wide variety of grays. Short little AI, which aren't emotional and usually do the work of pulling you on board. But taller grays, 3, 4, 5 feet, up to 6 or 7 even, who are very emotional. People have told me that they've never felt such a pure love as they have felt from these grays. But human looking is fairly common. Praying mantis, not very common, but absolutely turns up. Little blue beings, tall whites, really humanoids of all kinds.
Michael Kennedy has asking you if you could please say something about Charles Hall.
Charles Hall in the Millennial Hospitality books, which I recommend. He was a weather observer in the Nellis Range in Nevada area, and was put in that post. A bunch of people refused to take it. They'd worked there for a few months and said, weird stuff is happening, I'm not doing this, bye. And he soon learned what's going on. It was UFOs. And per his claims, he published his books as fiction, but essentially said that they were real. And then now has done the whole lecture circuit saying, oh yeah, that this is real. I tend to believe him because having read his books, I heard him speak. He comes across as very sincere and genuine. He fits the pattern I see with other cases. He is in contact with what we would call tall whites, who are all about science and very much business oriented, kind of. His books are really interesting. I would recommend him. He talked about how they taught him all kinds of mathematics. I found that super interesting because that is something that, as I said, people come away from their encounters not only psychic, but interested in astrophysics or mathematics or new form of mathematics or astronomy or you name it. They become, people with a high school education suddenly start doing things. Just talk to a guy. He says, I'm nobody super intelligent, but after my encounter, I was building computers, fixing ham radios and improving all this stuff in a way that he's like, I have no idea how I learned this stuff.
Huh. And mathematics would be the universal language,
Right.
Now, where do you think those different types, do you think they come from the same place or?
It's a trick question, and contactees have asked this because people are like, well, there's 50 different types of ET species. And I kind of bought into that for a while because they do look different. I mean, if you go into the UFO literature, it's like, wow, this one's got, almost no nose. And this one has giant eyes and they're, wrap around. And this one has little round eyes. And this one's colors got bluish. It's all over the map. But over and over again, and this is particularly true for people who've moved past fear and are having fully conscious encounters, ETs will talk to them about this. And as I said, they will say, we share a common heritage. We are all essentially human. My favorite case is Dolly Safran. I wrote a book about her case, Symmetry. And they said, we have genetics exactly like you do. Everyone dials out a little bit differently. Grays are human. I've heard this from other contactees as well. And it would make sense because we are apparently interbreeding with them. And the fact is there are human-looking ETs out there, which raises all kinds of questions about, well, they look just like us. How can this possibly be? Did we evolve on this planet? I don't think we did. According to the
unless all those ETs come from Earth.
Which, well, anything anthropocentric theories have always fallen by the wayside.
Or the solar system, I should say.
Yeah. No, as far as I can tell, the solar system is pretty well inhabited. And we're finding that out. I mean, NASA is always, we found our 1,000th extrasolar planet. It's like, I don't trust NASA to tell us the whole truth. I'm just saying that, but truth is coming out.
It is. The tall whites, are they always giving with information, or they're never really malevolent, are they?
No, I mean, they can be somewhat stern. In my own files, I have to say, I don't get what I would call outright evil, sadistic ETs. I've talked to a few people who've like, this was so bad, I didn't like it. I'm like, well, why? What happened? Like, it just scares the daylights out of me. I don't like it. I wish it would end. I'm like, well, I've talked to people who have basically said, go away. I never want to see you again. And their encounters will stop. Often they'll come back and check to see if you're still feeling that way. But I don't get this outright malevolence that I hear in some other quarters. And I look at some of these researchers, I'm like, this person is not a researcher. I don't trust them at all. I think he's a government agent. I'm not going to name names, but I think some contactees as well are liars. This is not I don't say this, lightly, because the last thing I want to do is accuse someone of wrongdoing and being a bad actor in this field. But it's true that people are lying. And we know our government is lying and doing a disinformation campaign. We know this. We've had enough whistleblowers say it, and it's become very clear that such things as my labs, military abductions are taking place where people are being badly treated, and I'm putting that lightly, with tools such as hypnosis and drugs and psychotronics and everything at their disposal to have a horrific encounter. That is not ET. And this is why the waters are so muddy. It's a terrible problem in this field because there are people who are having negative encounters and it's not ET. And they've putting forth like ETs are bad. They're here to hurt us. I'm like, think this through. They've been around forever.
Right.
For one thing, are they really going to come from, another star system to little old Earth to take over and to get their jollies by hurting people? We're the ones who are sadistic. We're the ones who commit mass genocide. We're the ones who are, someone wrote to me, ETs are destroying our planet, and I'm like, what? No, that's us. We're the ones who have chopped down over half the forests on this planet. We've polluted every lake, ocean, and river with plastic and dioxins and pesticides. We treat each other horribly. We treat ourselves horribly. We're treating this planet. And they're so concerned about this over and over again. People have asked them, why don't you just come down, fix things? Like, we can't. You have created these problems. It's up to you to fix it. We can only advise you. We can only help to a certain extent. And they do. They absolutely intervene. I know of cases where they've saved people's lives in a variety of ways. Not just healing, but, actually, prevented a car accident or a drowning or a fall or an assault or, a weather event. So they do intervene, but they're not here to hurt or take over. I don't buy into the malevolent ET hypothesis.
No, there's a theory out there that a malevolent race could never get to that advanced technology or.
Yeah. Do they have a belly button?
Yes.
Gosh, I don't know that I'm going to say that for them. I'll have to ask Dolly Saffron that. She would be my go-to gal. I can't say I've ever heard. I'll have to go through my files on that. That's a good question. I will say that generally speaking, yes, they have the same anatomy, because I have heard very descriptive, very graphic descriptions that I can't even repeat here. But yes, absolutely. They have all the glands and body systems. They pee, they poo, they breathe oxygen. They're very much like us.
Huh. You really wonder if they're an ancient race of humans, that have been on this earth for a very long time.
I don't think so. There's a theory, there's a term crypto-terrestrials, and people are like, well, maybe, they've lived here. Like, I think we would know it by now, for one thing. But I don't see any evidence of that. What I will tell you is that ETs have told people that we did not evolve here. That at one point we did live on Mars, actually, which I thought was pretty interesting, because there's quite a bit of research going into that, where, people are saying, well, could very well have lived on Mars millions of years ago. I find that super interesting, but no, I see no evidence that they're from here. And I say that for not only because that's what the evidence is showing us, but as I mentioned earlier, throughout history, science has always put us at the center of the universe. The universe revolves around us. We found out that wasn't true. Every time we put ourselves at the center of a phenomena, anthropocentrism, it turns out to be a completely, spurious, not true, false.
Right.
So,
now, have you had a sighting of or an encounter with one of these beings?
I have, yeah. I already talked about my missing time encounter. And it wasn't long after that I started having dreams of being on board. And I think dreams are a really good tool to remember, missing time. Because, dreams are a really good tool on a lot of levels. I don't like the term dreams because people think, it's fantasy, it's made up, it's garbage. No, dreams have a lot of valid information in them, and people should pay attention to them. Betty and Barney Hill were basically dreaming about what happened to them. Betty in particular, and her dreams were very accurate to what she recalled under hypnosis. So yeah, I started having dreams of like seeing what we call a free energy motor and being taught how that works, or being shown a star field and various things like that. Shown all the things I've been talking about. My first conscious kind of memory of that was, and this is somewhat vague, I will say, I was in my condominium, on third story condominium in Canoga Park, California, and I woke up because I felt what felt like a cat walking across my bed. I don't have a cat. So yeah, that woke me up. And I'm like, what the heck? And I was sleeping on my side, and I opened my eyes, and I could have sworn that I saw somebody rail thin, kind of bone white gray, standing next to my bed. My heart went thump, 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 and I opened my eyes real wide, and this darn thing darted out into the living room, around the corner, and was gone. And strangely, I did not get up. Oh, not that strange. Having interviewed people, you don't really react sometimes the way you think you would. But I think that may have been an encounter, but it was so quick. But yeah, I've had a number of very close-up sightings, a couple with telepathic communication. It just ramped up more and more. And yeah, eventually was pulled on board. Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, do you remember the ship and what it looked like?
Well, I remember the inside, not the outside.
You
I just remember like I'm hurtling through space and in this energetic beam. And I remembered that feeling too. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is happening. I remember this happening before. Oh my gosh. And it's very energetic. It's like almost being mildly electrocuted, but different. It's not uncomfortable. I mean, it wasn't painful. It's just, I think I could see how someone might say it was uncomfortable. I didn't think so. But boom, I'm like lying on a table surrounded by little guys and one tall lady who really caught my eye because she's very tall and very slender with this shiny white jumpsuit, beautiful big eyes with tightly curled white blonde hair. She's looking down at me with this tiny little mouth and a little turned up nose. And I just felt this great, not kinship, but love, goodwill coming from her. And she's like, are you all right? And I said, yes, I'm fine. And I tried to get up, and she gently pushed me back down. She's like, no, we need to make sure you're okay. And I said, I'm fine. I wanted to get up and see this ship, right? I was fully awake, and this was like unbelievably exciting for me. So after 3 or 4 attempts, she's like, fine, get up. And I stood up, and I'm in this, what? It's so funny because I've interviewed so many people, and you get this kind of picture in your head of what the inside of a craft looks like. And it's all, it was a little bit different, very much, along the lines of what I've certainly interviewed people. But the walls were rounded, of course. The ceiling was smooth. The air was very pure, and there were windows going all the way around. It's a 40-foot wide room. There's this not huge, very tall, slender, gray ET, a tall gray, wearing a white smock. And she's looking at me, and she's the epitome of grace and love and wisdom. So I walk right up to her, and I'm like, wow. I'm looking up at her, and she's looking down at me with her head slightly tilted. This little, very subtle smile on her face. And I am absolutely entranced because look at this person who is not human as we would think of it. I'm like, she's amazing. I mean, I'm like instantly like, wow. And she said, so telepathically, is this what you thought it would be like? Or yes, I wrote it down. It was, so is this how you thought it would be? And I said, no, this is much better. I was ready to stay with them. If they had asked, I would have stayed.
Right.
I'm not kidding. I mean, I'm not tied down to a whole lot of family, really. I mean, I do have brothers and sisters, but
you would have gone for the ride. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was wild. I saw other people there. I saw little, very gray-looking grays who did kind of make my heart jump into my mouth a little bit. I'm like, whoa. It was so cool.
Now, what do you think about the females that have had multiple abductions, and then they have a hybrid child that they're shown?
Yeah.
Has there ever been a male that has been abducted that was shown a child?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
okay.
And I get in trouble if I use that word, by the way, abducted, because people will tell me, I wasn't abducted. I told you I was
Okay.
invited on board.
All right.
Okay, and some people prefer that term, but most don't. So I've kind of
Okay.
used the term now, on board encounter, because it's neutral, and whether you liked it or not, it's accurate.
Right.
So I'm just going to start there. But yeah, I've interviewed a number of people who've had that experience. Dolly Saffron is one of them. They asked her, she agreed. Another lady, Pat Brown, had that experience, and she said, I felt a little bit of violation there, but ultimately she decided her experiences were positive. She said it was a mixed bag in the beginning, but she again asked to have encounters, and they came. Another couple I interviewed from Canada, a wonderful young couple, were looking for help, and they had contacted several researchers who just wanted their story. And my first goal is always to help the person. And I talked to a lot of people, and it's pretty rare that I will use their story. Only after I've worked through it, I'm like, if you're interested, I would love to write about your story. And so that's kind of what happened with them. But they just wanted counseling because they had gotten pregnant, and their child was 7.5 months along. She sent me the medical records.
Oh.
And they had an encounter, and she was no longer pregnant. They took her baby, and the husband was just lost over this, and she was fine. She's like, I know he's in a good place. And she ended up seeing the baby afterwards. She believes she agreed to this, and this is what most people will tell me. Again, not everyone will agree with that, but that's most of the people I've talked to who've had that experience. Yeah, they believe that this is something they agreed to. And yeah, one gentleman, he did not like his encounters, by the way, in upstate New York, was having missing time and a lot of fear associated with it. He did say he got great stuff from his encounters. He became profoundly psychic. He could give readings on the snap of a finger. But he was pulled on board and saw a gray, and there was a little child. And I said, here's your child. This is from you. You needed to know why you were being taken. Aren't you happy? And he's like, well, no, I'm not happy. And he said he saw this child and his heart just broke because he loved this child. But at the same point, it wasn't fully human. And he felt a little bit of repulsion. And he was also a little bit angry at the Greys, who seemed a little bit baffled by this.
Was he ever on board before?
He had enough missing time encounters that I'm going to say yes for sure,
Okay.
but didn't really click to it. And that's the problem. Fear distorts perception, it blocks memories, and it can cause you to label an experience as negative. And again, that's not their intention. And that's the first thing they'll tell you people. Don't be afraid. We're not here to hurt you. No harm will come to you. Please have no fear. You're gonna be fine. But yeah, he was shown his child. And real quick, because I know you asked Miss V about implants. So I started looking into that early on because I had a lady who was being implanted, and she's like, what are you doing? Is this for tracking? And they said, no, we can find you wherever we want, whenever we want. And they said, this is to measure the level of pollution in your body. I thought, oh, that's interesting, because I got another case and it said, this is to monitor your health. And I started looking into the literature on this, and there was a lot of speculation. Oh, it's mind control. It's for tracking. We track animals, so do they. I don't think so. Because I talked to a lady, she had her implant removed, and they still came and got her and re-implanted her. And another lady, she lost her implant, got really sick. They pulled her back on board, healed her of this hypoglycemia condition. From what I've been able to determine, and I think there's some good evidence to support this, I'm not speculating, The purpose of implants largely, because there are some other purposes, is to monitor health, to stabilize your health system, to measure levels of pollution, to boost the immune system. It's health related in most cases. In some cases, it might be to, I mean, Dolly Saffron, in her case, they told her, well, we're putting an implant in you so you can help pilot the craft. There are people, they'll sit you down in the pilot seat and teach you how to fly the craft. There's a bunch of cases of this. So there's some different reasons for implants, but not for mind control or tracking. It's health related in most cases.
Are the implants all very similar?
Sometimes, yeah. Dr. Roger Lear wrote a book, The Aliens in the Scalpel, and was pulling out these implants from people, and a bunch of them looked identical, little cantaloupe seeds. Others were little rods. Some, it's funny, AAOS mentions meteorite. Some, they did analysis of them, and some of them seemed to contain, meteoritic metal, which makes zero sense to how this could get in a person's body. Some are magnetic. They will move around in a person's body sometimes.
Okay.
I talked to one lady, she took her son to the dentist. He had this foreign body, a round, like BB-like object under his back left molar. And the dentists were losing their mind over it because they took one x-ray, it was there. They took a second, it was gone, and a third x-ray, and it was back. They've taken repeated x-rays. It's still there over a period of years. He's very, very psychic too. He's a real special child. It's a 14-year-old boy this is happening to. Well, he's now in his early 20s. But yeah, I took that x-ray to 2 different doctors, both researchers. One's a MUFON field investigator like me, a general physician. And he's like, that's a foreign body. What is this? Did he shoot himself in the mouth with a BB gun? Like, no, he didn't. There's no entry wound. It's asymptomatic. The tooth is fine. Took it to an emergency physician. He's like, that's a metallic foreign body. No doubt. So yeah, I've come to realize most contactees, if not all, because I can't say all, I don't know for sure, but many of them that I've certainly talked to at some point will go to the doctor. Doctor's like, well, this is odd. There's something up here in your sinuses, or, have you had surgery on your foot? You've got an object down there. So I think it's fairly common, actually.
Now, different parts of the body? No
Yeah.
particular. Okay, it's everywhere.
Sometimes like behind the ear, sometimes in the jaw, sometimes in the septum, sometimes in the hand, sometimes in the thigh. It's pretty much all over the place. So yeah.
Jeez. So what is the consensus of these implants? You think it's for various different reasons?
Yeah.
But
well, this is a problem in the field. There's no real consensus with anything. That's my assessment. I think there are a few consensuses, or a consensus that these are very advanced beings. Excuse me. Or that UFOs are real. That's a consensus.
You had said, go ahead.
No real consensus onto what they are, but that healing aspect comes up over and over.
It does. Huh.
You had said something. I can't remember exactly what it was related to. It could be that people that have had contact or encounters have a level of being psychic or having those abilities. Do you?
Very prominent. Yeah.
Should have wrote that down. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the rule rather than the exception. And this can be a two-way street because there are people who were very much psychic before their encounters, but rarely is there someone who's had repeated onboard experiences and hasn't experienced one of 10 different things. Let me see if I can remember most of them. Healing ability, hands-on healing, Reiki, this sort of thing. Remote viewing, astral projection, clairvoyance, mediumship, physical levitation. Not kidding. This is not ETs lifting up a beam of light. Following an encounter, I've got about 20 cases of people who physically levitated following an encounter. One guy contacted me from Europe after I put out a video on this. He was crying. He's like, I'm so glad. I could never tell people about this. I had this real close-up sighting, and I started levitating in my room, only when nobody was around. People think I'm nuts. I can't tell anybody. But yeah, levitation is definitely part of it. The whole list of psychic abilities, psychometry, seeing shadow people, you name it. There's something about contact that is a little bit interdimensional, I think. There are different avenues towards becoming psychic. People who have near-death experiences report this sort of same after effect. It somehow activates or elevates or enhances your bioelectric field. People have poltergeist activity breaking out after an encounter. Some are like, well, it's demonic. I'm like, wait, no.
Does it get confused for demonic?
Yeah,
Of the levitating, the just changing your senses, could that not be confused with being demonic? And so that gives them a double whammy already. You know?
And if you've got a religious viewpoint, that might be your jump, your go-to, your sort of conclusions. And if you look behind me, you can see my bookshelf. I've got books on demons, on angels, multiple personalities, psychiatry, all of this stuff. I looked into it. No, it's not demonic. Those are real. It manifests in a completely different way. But I want to jump to Michael Kennedy's question, because there's this recent whistleblower, Jake Barber, who's talking about psychotronics and how you can use psychic abilities and technology to fool ETs and link up with them and bring their craft down. I am not a fan of that theory. Yes, you can psychically contact ETs. CE5s are a real thing. I've done them. They work because ETs are very telepathic. They know what you're thinking. They will sometimes show up for people. Absolutely. Can we bring them down? No. Can you fool them into thinking we're ET and we're going to? No. These guys are not thousands of years advanced. It's millions. It's more than that. Their technology is so off the charts that when people talk about reverse engineering, it's this much compared to what they can actually do. These craft are absolutely what look to us like magic. They're not. It's technology, but they're flown psychically. There is a psychic aspect to it. And these craft themselves are embodied alive, as AAO talked about. But no, you cannot bring them down and fool them. They know before you fire any missile. They know before you press any button. This is my opinion based on my research. I'm getting some pushback. You know what? There's disinformation in this field, and I'm not happy about it because I can see this false flag, ET threat narrative rolling forward. And we have to arm our best weapon against this is knowledge. It's up to everyone. Don't believe me. Do your research into this. Check every firsthand case of ET contact out. And, be sure to collect a lot of them because some of them are bogus. They're very fear-based.
Do you agree with everything Stephen Greer says? I hope I got that right. Stephen Greer? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't think I agree with everything anybody says.
Okay.
Honestly, because nobody has all the answers.
I used to until I started getting second opinions. I apologize till I started opening the box more, but I apologize for interrupting.
No worries. I know I've actually had some long conversations with him. I've met him many times over the years. I will say he's a very nice guy. He's been very nice to me. He's a polarizing figure, no doubt. There are some who are very big fans and some who are absolutely are unhappy with some of the things he says. He says we can shoot him down. I don't think so. But I agree with a number of things he's saying, that ETs are not here to hurt us. I think he's done excellent work in terms of the CE5 movement, and even more importantly, pushing towards disclosure, bringing whistleblowers out and trying to get the truth about the cover-up out there. So yeah, I think he's done some excellent work. But I think also he's, I don't agree with everything he says. He told me, he says, I had this big old argument with him, a discussion, because I actually wanted him to write the foreword to one of my healing books. He's like, you use the word abduction. I'm like, well, yeah. This was very early on, my first book in 1996. It's like, that it doesn't happen. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? You yourself were taken on board. He's like, yeah, but it's very, very rare. I'm like, well, I'm not so sure it's as rare as you think. And I started going through the cases. He's like, it's all government. You have to understand, it's all government. I'm like, it's not all government. I've come to realize it's more than I thought. But no, contact is far more common than most people realize. J. Allen Hynek, you may have heard of him, very well known, said 1 in 40 people have been taken on board. I heard that early on in my research. I'm like, no way. I know 40 people. I would know somebody. That's what got me to ask everybody I knew. And I didn't have to ask 40 people. I found like 5 who had missing time. And the Roper poll a year later, 1991, found 1 in 50 people show the markers of being a contactee. It's far more common. So yeah, people are absolutely being taken on board by ETs.
I'll tell you what I like about you, Preston. I like the fact that you are bold enough and you stand on your research and your knowledge enough to not apologize for forming an opinion. And I appreciate that and I respect that. And I think that's awesome. I'd have 3 questions for you. I think they kind of all go along. This is, Preston, in your opinion, what role does consciousness play in the experience? And then I'm going to put and you can answer that. And then they have this up there. If you want to answer that one first.
On the second one?
The first one was what about the consciousness?
Okay. Well, I'll answer the first one because I don't want to forget this one. Consciousness plays a role in an experience, just as consciousness plays a role in any experience that you have. We all have a belief system. We all perceive reality through our level of wisdom and knowledge. Through, fear can paint a huge color and experience profoundly. Your cultural values, your religious beliefs, all play a powerful role. Consciousness absolutely plays a role in how you perceive an experience. People who have become spiritually evolved or psychically evolved, who are able to use their consciousness in ways like remote viewing and astral projection, have overcome fear, will almost always have a much better time with it because they have moved past that, fear, which is a big, big problem. And in terms of contacting ETs, yeah, this is the whole trick to CE5 work. Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind is consciousness, telepathy, reaching out mentally, telepathically to ETs. So yeah, I'm going to say it plays a huge role in all things, and particularly in UFO encounters. Yeah. As far as these objects, let me see. I saw a video not long of these 3 objects that were hit with a rocket somewhere in a war zone or something. Video footage of objects dripping like molten metal didn't get destroyed. I think we've shot, I put out a video on my YouTube channel. Stop, UFO, don't shoot. Because I collected a bunch of cases of people who have shot at UFOs. Everything from handguns to rifles to, missiles. And there's one case in Vietnam, I think it was, where they shot a missile at a UFO and it threw it right back at them. In most cases, if you shoot at it, they'll just go on their merry way. People have heard it pinging off the metal. I mentioned Dolly Saffron, I contacted you earlier. She was on board when someone whipped out a handgun shot at the UFO, and it pinged back and hit him in the thigh. They pulled that man on board and healed him. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of attempts to shoot them down with everything from so-called particle beam weapons and missiles and what have you. But their technology, they create a field around them that is impenetrable. And they know long before you press the button on any weapon. You cannot fool an ET into thinking you're an ET with psychotronic weapons or consciousness or what have you. They know. That's my assessment, because I have to give kudos to any whistleblower out there who's putting their reputation on the line. But I think some of them are sanctioned. I think some of them are carefully groomed to have certain experiences and actually believe it. But I think some are flat out liars. It's a mess. I'm so naive. I got into this field thinking, oh, this is interesting. How cool. I did not expect any cloak and dagger stuff and all this weird lying and disinformation and cover up. I've kind of shied away from it. I watch it. I follow it. But I've focused my research on onboard experiences. Because to me, that's the cutting edge. That's where the truth is. You're not getting it from the governments. I don't trust them. They open their mouth, they're lying. So that's kind of my feeling of all this. I hate to say it, but it's their fault. They've dug their own grave. If the Pentagon wants to talk about UFOs or the intelligence agencies, I have a couple of requests. First, admit to the truth of Roswell. Admit to the Capitol, Washington, D.C. flyover of 1952. Admit to the Edwards Air Force Base visitation in California with President Eisenhower in 1954. Admit to the Malmstrom incident of 1967, March, where they shut down our missiles. Admit to the truth of 20, 30 major UFO events throughout world history, and then we can talk. But until you can come clean with that, I don't trust you. I'm sorry.
I have something here that I really think you should hear. AO says, I love you, Preston. You are the reason and the person that inspired me to figure out my encounter. I love you and I am thankful for you and your channel. Your channel saved my life.
Oh, thank you, AO.
That was nice.
Very nice.
So those Pentagon films that were released, do you think those are real? I personally think that they're drones, government drones.
Oh, the whole drone wave is us. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends what you're looking at. There's some valid footage out there, but I think a lot of it is us. If pulled the recent stuff, all of it. And here's the thing: just because you've got a Navy pilot saying, "Oh my gosh, look at this," it's this subject is compartmentalized to a degree that people very highly placed in government are not in the loop, and that would include all the way up to the presidential office, who I think are to some extent informed, but are not really running the country even. It's the military-industrial complex. That is running the country. It's the intelligence agencies in the highest level of the military and the 1%ers who are running the country. It's the insurance industry. It's the banking industry. It's the pharmaceutical industry. They're never going to disclose the healing aspects of UFOs because they make $1 billion in profit each year. They're on my naughty list. Shame on them. Do the right thing. Tell the truth. It's not that hard. Do the right thing.
Yeah, they don't want us to know the truth about many topics,
Yeah, well, that's too bad because truth, you can hide it. You can ignore it. You can distort it, but you can never destroy it. Truth is immortal. You can't destroy it. It is what it is. There's no your truth or my truth. The truth is the truth. And it's going to come out. I've said it before. You can't hide the sky sooner or later. You can try, but good luck.
Sunny Blog is a big fan of yours, Preston, and she shares all of your podcast. And actually, she supports a lot of podcasts out there. If you guys are out there, you guys go check the Facebook page out, and because just out there doing something positive. But says Preston Dennett, big fan here. I share your videos and podcast on my blog page. So
I'm truly honored.
You
Yeah,
when
this is why I do this research, because when I found out UFOs were real, it knocked me over. I was not happy. I was really upset. And I think, gosh, how hard it must be for people who have never had an encounter and come along, and next thing you know, they're being sucked on board, and we're being lied to. With our own tax dollars are being spent to make UFO witnesses look like liars, fools, idiots, drug users, mentally ill. I'm not standing for it. No, that's not right.
I think you might have hit on this. Does Preston think hypnotic regression works and can reveal a true occurrence?
I do. And the reason I say that is because if you take the fully conscious encounters and you line them up next to the hypnotically recalled encounters, they absolutely jibe. They connect, they corroborate. People are reporting the exact same things, whether it's hypnotically recalled or fully conscious. I will say that it is very important to be careful, because there are hypnotically recalled cases. I'm like, this one is, I've never heard this. And we know from many studies on hypnosis that it can absolutely be used to create what we would call false memories. This has been proven. It's why it's not allowed in a court of law, because it's not reliable in the wrong hands. But done correctly by someone who's not going to lead the witness, which is not as easy to do as you might think, it is a very effective tool. I generally don't recommend it, because I always tell people, first, write down your experience in as much detail, put it away, meditate, go back to it. I bet you can fill out some more details. Do that 4 or 5 times. Meditate on the whole experience. Ask for dreams about it. Go through a whole process. Go to a support group. People will say stuff and boom, that happened to me. So I really only recommend it if you've had a very clear-cut case of missing time. It is affecting your ability to live a normal life. Perhaps you have like incredible anxiety about this. Can't fall asleep, or you're in fear all the time. Work through it. It's a great tool. And there's a show called Mythbusters. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's a fun show because they try to
blow stuff up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they decided to do this show on hypnotic regression, and I watched it because I like the show because it's interesting. You learn stuff, and what they did is they've staged a fake invasion, a fake sort of traumatic incident where a guy comes running into their office and is knocking things over, calling people names, and just creating a ruckus, and walks out. And the producer's like, okay, this is our experiment today. What just happened? Write it down. And this just happened, right? So they all sat in the corner and they wrote down what the witness looked like and his clothes he was wearing and so forth. And some were pretty good and some were like too surprised and scared to really observe carefully. Put them all under regressive hypnosis, and it worked. They got the tattoos, they got the color of this shirt, all of it. It was so cool. It does work, yes.
Preston, what is your opinion of the David y'all gonna make me say that last name knowing I can't walk with you.
Eckhart.
Go for it, Don.
Gosh.
Watcher.
David Eckhart case. I can't say that.
Oh, he's rubbing his head. Oh no.
It's not coming up. I've heard of it. I can't comment on it. I don't remember it well enough. I'm sorry.
I got a question. The onboard encounters, are they happening more frequently now than they ever have in past millennia or past centuries?
No, they've absolutely
They've
dropped.
always.
Here's the thing: is from my contactee Dolly Saffron. I've mentioned her before. She's like, the ETs are not here now. I'm like, what? She's like, no, our magnetic fields are collapsing. This is a big deal.
Yeah, we're about 30% down right now.
Yeah, and you can look this up. Don't believe me. Look it up. Go to Suspicious Observers. It used to be called.
It's Space Weather News now.
Yeah, Space Weather News.
Yeah, Ben Davidson. Yeah, I'm a follower of him.
Yeah, look, at all the information you can find on the Carrington event and just look into that. But yeah, Dolly's like, no, they're not here. They can't fly now. I'm like, well, this would explain why I'm not getting any first-hand reports over the past couple of years. Talked to Cheryl Costa. She's in touch with some Tibetan monks who are very psychically evolved, who told her, no, they're not here. We're in contact with them, and they're not showing up.
Are there a lot of accounts back? I know biblical stories, some could be onboard encounters, but like in the Renaissance times, or
it goes way back.
It does. Okay.
Yeah.
So there are many accounts of these onboard encounters back then.
There's some. Here's the thing. If you research it, there's some people who specialize in this.
Yeah.
There's no doubt some of these encounters with so-called fairies are probably ETs. I think fairies, gnomes, and little people are real, and I think that's a separate class of entity. There are people who are conflating these all together. I'm hesitant to do that because I don't think that's actually valid.
Right.
But I do think it goes way back. Gosh, I lost my train of thought. There was something I wanted to say, but I forget what it was. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
It'll come back to me.
Okay. So the magnetic field started really collapsing around 2000. Is that when these onboard encounters have dropped off?
Well, no, more recently, actually.
Is it more? Okay.
And it's funny because I've talked to some contactees who are like, they stopped coming. I don't know what's up. I'm like, well, from what I understand. Oh, that's what I wanted to say, because I'm getting some pushback on this from people. I'm like, well, I'm still in contact with them. I'm like, yes, absolutely. You can still be in contact with ETs telepathically and having full-on interactions that, might seem 100% real, because they can manifest like we would remote view, perhaps, or astral project. And it would probably be perceived as real, because, it is essentially real, but it's, in terms of being physically taken on board, I'm not so sure about that. But yeah, because there's some like, well, how can you say, I'm still having experiences? I'm like, well, yeah, I bet you are. So and they are watching over us. They are absolutely watching over us still. They're very aware of what's going on.
Okay, so they're connected. Once you have an onboard experience, you're connected with them now.
Yeah, for the most part. Some people have a one-off in their lives. That's pretty rare, actually, because it usually starts very early in childhood and continues throughout life. And it could be every 5 years or every 10, or it's usually, somewhere between, 4 or 5 or 10, but it can be upwards of hundreds and even thousands, depending on your level of how much you want to work with them, perhaps, or how much. Some people, all they get is a little sighting. That's all they need. It's not their life path, but they needed to know, because ETs are conducting a publicity campaign, a grassroots publicity campaign to announce to the entire world that they are real. Disclosure has happened. How many cases do we need? Any person with an objective perspective can look at the huge worldwide database and know this is real. Disclosure has happened on the part of the ETs. They don't need to hover over New York City for 3 days. They've already done massive waves all over the world and have done their part.
So the sightings have gone down also? Just the sightings of a UFO? Okay.
Yeah. People, the drones, I got a lot of pushback on this. Like, oh no, those are ETs and there's orbs. I'm like, well, hold on a second. Just because you're seeing an orb, got to remember our government has not 3D or 5G. They've got incredibly advanced technology to do holograms. Yeah. So you can fly a dragon in the sky, and you're going to think it's a real, honest-to-God dragon. No, I don't think that those are genuine ET. That's my assessment based on my research, but I consulted with James Goodall. He's an aviation historian. He's one of the best. And he's like, I don't think that they're ET. AO's question, can we answer that one?
Yes, I've been waiting on that one. Because we had someone, Mike, on when we were talking about the owl experiences. Do you want me to read it, or do you want to just go straight into an answer?
Well, for those who can't see it, I'll just summarize it here. She says, I have an owl encounter with 4 hours of missing time, but I heard those are the worst. Do you know about those ones with missing time? I'm not sure I want to remember this one. Mike Cleland is a researcher who wrote a book called The Messengers,
Yes.
who pretty much cemented the fact that there is this weird connection and a very interesting mythology with owls. No, I don't think that it's worse. I think that sometimes people will be left with the memory of an owl, but owls symbolize all kinds of things in all kinds of cultures. And I think sometimes we do suppress experiences that were difficult for us to process. So in terms of that, yeah, that can be traumatic and difficult to work through. So I would just bring that up. But there is this weird owl connection. Whitley Strieber talked about it. He's just left with the memory of an owl sitting in his window. It was grays. The whole time it was grays. Lots of cases of that. That's probably the number one of what we would call a screen memory. Owls.
I would love to get you and Mike on one night just to chat about each other's experiences. This one says, Preston, I saw a UFO cigar shape that was miles and miles, gigantic in size back when I was in high school.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting. In terms of like mother ships, some people describe these craft as really big. I've come to realize that we're not great at estimating size, because here's the problem. If you see a jet in the sky, well, we know how big a jet is, because we've seen them close up inside of them. But when you see a craft up in the sky, it's very hard to estimate its size, because unless you're an expert in light scattering and all these different, triangulating, it's very difficult to estimate its size. Some of these craft are huge, no doubt about it. There are as many cases of very large cigar-shaped craft letting out smaller ones, and they'll come swooping down, and these smaller ones are not so small. They're like 20 feet across. So just estimating that, you can see that, this craft is much larger. But this is one of the things I look for when I'm interviewing something. I'm like, how high up was it? And they're like, well, I couldn't really tell you. This could have been a large object pretty close, or a small object close, or a very large object quite far away. But if you pay close attention, because I mentioned light scattering, and you can see this with photographs. The farther away something is from you, the more atmosphere interferes with it. It gets dimmer. It kind of has this weird fading effect to it. It's one of the ways photographic analysts are able to determine whether an object is small and close to the camera or large and distant.
Right.
I don't know if you want to answer that question or not.
Oh, do I think our government is going to stage a fake alien takeover? Yeah, I do. In a word, I'm worried about it. It's been the buzz of the UFO community for well over a decade.
Since the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that in the 70s.
Depopulating, fake ET invasion. And if you look at some of these encounters in various countries, I'll point to Brazil, the Colares event, which was very negative and quite scary. I wonder about that one. The Brazilian face peelers. I'm like, come on. I don't think that that's a genuine ET event.
No, it's probably us practicing.
Yeah, the drone wave could be something along those lines too. Yeah, I'm concerned about it because there's little doubt in my mind that ET threat narrative is being built brick by brick. And I keep taking my battering ram. I'm trying to knock those bricks out because it's not true. Please don't believe our government. Please take a very careful look
Well, hopefully the excuse me. Hopefully, the loss of our magnetic shield will make it unable for them to do that.
You never know. I don't know. These guys, I hate to say it, but our governments are just naughty. Because even if you go beyond, if you go, outside of the UFO field, and look how they've treated citizens, from mass genocide and testing people with hallucinogenic drugs and sterilizing disenfranchised parts of our population and keeping people essentially in poverty, inciting divisiveness and hatred, and irradiating soldiers without even telling them. And sorry, I kick you out. No benefits for you.
Right.
I'm not happy about it. This is
right.
And the ETs aren't either. They've made it very clear that war and aggression and greed and corruption is choking our forward spiritual progress.
Right. I have a question. I forgot it a few minutes ago, but you know the story about the people that were camping in the desert? They had a RV. A couple was out there and they saw the UFO, and then they saw creatures coming down.
I do. Ron Felber's book, Death Valley.
Yeah. Now, was it their perception that it was a negative attack, or because
this is so tricky, and I have to be so polite here because a person's experience is a person's experience.
Yeah, we all perceive things differently.
Yeah, and it's not my job to say that didn't happen to you, or that this was, you're okay and you're fine. And if a person's had a negative experience, this was their experience. Now, and how they interpret it that's their interpretation, and they have every right to interpret it that way. I know of that case, and what I can say about it is I would call it an outlier. And by that, I mean, I don't have any other cases like that. I don't know of any other cases like that. That's a huge red flag. For one, this is not to say it didn't happen. I'm just saying, because when I get a unique event, I have to put it on the back burner. I have to, I'm not going to throw away evidence. I'm not going to say this person's lying unless I can prove that they're lying, or there's strong indications of it. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that case other than I really feel for them, and I hope it wasn't in my lab. Must have been very scary either way. Yeah, they survived it. I think they're okay.
Right. And they did have memories of being on board, right?
Gosh, I read that book so long ago.
Yeah, I think they
did.
That
one out. I remember the author, Ron Felber. I forget what it was called, the book. I've got it somewhere back there.
Okay. Yeah, I always wondered about that one because that one did stick out to me.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me when someone has a completely wow, that one's different.
Right.
Levon has a quick question, and we've had you on for 2 hours. I don't know how long you want to go, but Levon says, can we manifest them and they appear to us as a large animal or what we may not be scared of?
Well, I wouldn't say we manifest them. I don't think it's us doing it. I think they exist independent of us. Just to be clear, but can we call them in? Yeah. If it's amenable to them, if this is something they feel they can do or want to do or would be helpful to us. And they can absolutely appear as something we're not scared of. If they feel like, you can see this especially with children's encounters. Talk to a bunch of people who've had encounters as children. They'll appear superheroes. One lady told me that it was teddy bears. I saw through it. It was the Greys. But clowns, that comes up quite a bit. I always wonder about the widespread fear of clowns in our society. I brought it up at a UFO support meeting once, and
John Wayne Gacy
dropped a bomb. People are screaming.
I think John Wayne Gacy got you on that one. In my opinion, says, it would be a memory screaming. Let's see. I'm trying to get these questions out. Um, Sunny says she saw Air Force. I missed the first part of that. She saw Air Force planes surrounding what she thought was a massive USO or a UFO. And I have one more. It says, Preston, could you please comment on what everyone is alluding to of the events coming before or soon or 2027 at the end of the year?
Yeah.
Have you heard?
What's that guy? Bashar saying ETs are coming in 2027. I think he's one of the people. I have done a lot of research into channeling, and I find it very interesting. I'm just not buying into some of these things because there's been a lot of predictions over the years, and they've more often than not failed to materialize. ETs have told people that a day may come when there's an existential crisis, and they will rescue people. And I think this message is widespread enough from direct contactees that there's likely some truth to it. When that will happen, I couldn't say. When I got involved in this field in the late 1980s, just everyone was already making these predictions. Disclosure is next year. It didn't happen. And it's
Right.
just never panned out. So I've become a little jaded, honestly, which is funny because I'm really an optimistic guy. I really want to believe the best of people. But no, I just don't know that our governments will ever disclose. I think if any event like that might be coming, it's sort of disinformation to sort of build up this ET threat narrative and false flag narrative. I'm like, yay, it's 2027. Look, there's in the sky. They're coming. I told you. And they start shooting at people. If an ET is shooting and killing and blowing up a city, it's not ET.
Right.
My opinion.
Yeah.
If you want to email me and tell me I'm wrong, go ahead. But I'm just trying to really not speculate too much. And talking about the future and predictions is very tricky business.
Right. Yeah. For
Well,
thousands of years, they haven't bothered us. But now that our technology is getting close to theirs, it's all bad,
Yeah. Well, I'm not so sure we're that close, but we're close enough where you would think it was a UFO. Yeah.
You're right.
When drones came out, I'm like, oh no, this is going to wreak havoc.
Yeah. They've had different kinds of drones for many years.
Yeah.
And they're powered by, I think, a nuclear power source.
Oh, I'm not aware of that. Wouldn't surprise me, but.
No, I used to work for McDonnell Douglas and Intel out in Arizona, and I talked to a lot of people out there because I was interested in it, and I started the conversation, and then I'd get pulled aside, and guys were telling me what we had back then. Yeah,
I know it's far advanced of what we see in the public arena. It's not these little hobbyist drones that people are seeing.
No. Did you ever hear the story of the high school kids that built a small UFO in the late 70s? High school, yeah. I mean, the technology is pretty simple if you think about it.
Yeah, I wonder about it. There's a number of stories like that circulating. Like one kid built a device and it was knocking planes out and power surges.
Yeah, what I was told back then was if you've ever had a balloon in a room and you see the dust attract to your balloon, you reverse the polarity of the dust and it goes away from the balloon. That was what I was told the technology was. That's how it was explained to me.
No. Electrostatic. It's interesting. I don't know. I couldn't.
Yeah.
Preston, we have one last question for you because I mean we thrown some questions at you all over the place. Would you like to comment on this one?
Yeah, from Mysterious Oklahoma. Can I elaborate on the Topanga Canyon sightings and the recent fires in the area? Will this affect the phenomenon going on in the area?
Oh, sorry. There you go.
Yeah, well, Topanga Canyon has a history of encounters. That's where I grew up. I never saw anything, not until I started really looking for it. And then I did, but I've certainly interviewed. It's got a history of encounters going way, way back. And it's also a very fire-prone area. I remember we had to flee our house. And just these recent fires. I've got 2 friends whose houses burnt down. It's tragic. No, I don't think UFOs are affected by our disasters or have any input or cause related to them really whatsoever. I will say that there are cases of UFOs who have shown up before an earthquake and warned people. There was one lady I interviewed in Topanga Canyon who had an encounter before the Northridge quake and basically felt that they saved her life because she had this statue that ended up falling on her bed, and she wasn't sleeping in her bed that night because she had this encounter.
Wow.
But, and I saw some footage of UFOs flying around these fires, and I'm like, no, I don't. This is that CGI stuff is what it looked like to me. And again, I just don't trust a lot of the footage coming out. Even on these drones, I'm like, which one of this is real and which isn't? Some of it you can tell it's just so outrageous. Like, come on, mile-wide object going through a city street, and everyone. No, you can easily discount that. But some of it's very well done. But
right.
Yeah, the fires are part of, I think, the reason we're mistreating this planet. And for that matter, this could be, nefarious agents, people's arsonists, or look what happened in Maui. There's some really suspicious reports about that. And, Canada had crazy wildfires, and California is still struggling. Australia practically burnt down a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I think I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. It's not my area of expertise. It's hard for me to comment on it. But I'm watching closely, and I am a little bit conspiratorial minded because I know that, like I said, some of our agents within our quote secret government are not nice people.
No.
There is a lady on YouTube that I listen to is she started with the fires in Hawaii, and I wish I could remember her channel. It's Bush Fire. I can't remember, but she lives in LA now. But she does a lot of breakdowns of the fires that are going on, how you can have a car that's completely melted and the tree beside it's not touched. So I'll just leave that there. If I can find that, I will post her YouTube channel in my group on Facebook, and I would encourage everybody to follow her. It makes you kind of scratch your head. Been trying to get in touch with her to get her on the show, but she's hard to get in touch with.
I will say fires are tricky. I've got experience with wildfires, and trees are naturally fire resistant. In cars, they're explosive. So we have to be very careful.
So no singe, no nothing.
There's that whole spontaneous combustion phenomena.
There it is. There she is.
I think it deserves more research, and we must consider all possibilities and remain open-minded. But absolutely, we have to be very careful to determine the truth of what's going on here.
She's got some good experts. I think there's her YouTube channel name right there. I think you guys would enjoy her. Every time she puts something up, I listen to it with an open mind.
Yeah, there is a lack of precipitation all around the world also.
Yeah.
That's been going on for a little while. I don't know about the last couple of years, but about 5 or 6 years ago, there was no precipitation all around the earth.
Yeah, Topanga, where I grew up, used to have all kinds of wildlife, deer and raccoon and fox and cougar, and none of it's there now. It hasn't been there in 10, 20 years.
Wow.
Just a little bit of, deer, and I saw a cougar running from the fire. That was all over the internet. It's very sad.
Oh.
Jeez.
I can't talk about the wildlife. Y'all gonna make me upset because I used to do animal protection. So Preston, I'm gonna let Don close the show, but I wanted to ask you, is there anyone you want to acknowledge that has been an influence to you, or you just want to put something out there to someone that it doesn't even have to be about this subject, could be anyone in your life? Is there anyone you want to acknowledge?
Well, of course, my family, they've always been very supportive of me, even though this was very hard for some of them. I love all the contactees I've spoken to. Dolly Saffron has been a big influence on my understanding of this subject. So I definitely give a shout out to her. But yeah, shout out to anyone who's had a UFO experience and has bravely stepped forward, and even those who haven't. I feel you. Yeah, I would just tell everyone, let's live our lives with letting love and truth guide our actions, and I think we'll be all the better for it.
Well, I think you're pretty incredible. Dot, I want to
Yes.
thank everyone in chat. Don, I'm going to let you close the show down, sir. Thank
Okay,
you,
well,
Preston.
yes, thank you, Preston. And I'm going to keep trying to have a encounter because I've tried for a long time, but it hasn't happened yet.
Meditate.
But
That's the trick.
I did. I've done all that. I've done the, projecting yourself above the earth, coming down to where you are. I think
All
I
right.
heard that from Greer, but I've tried all that. The only thing I got was those orbs in front of me, which was interesting,
There you go. That's an encounter.
Yeah, but
Come on.
I don't think I left. I stayed there.
Oh, all right.
But thank you, Preston. I really enjoyed the show. A lot of great information there. And yes, thank the chat for showing up. A lot of good questions coming in. And thanks, Miss V, for hanging around. And I think we're good. So
All right.
I'd like to say goodnight to everyone. And we'll see you all on Saturday. So thank you, Preston.